Hi, I'm attorney Gregory Dell, joined by attorney Alexander Palamara, and we're going to talk about one of Alex's resolved cases against Reliance Standard, and it's a long-term disability insurance claim. And Alex, in these claims, we like to talk about the history of the claim, the policy language, what your plan of attack and strategy was in the appeal to help win the claim, and then provide some tips for people who have Reliance Standard claims that may help them in the future to secure benefits. So tell us about the history of this claim.
So this claim is actually pretty interesting and is a pretty good guy, this client of ours. Before he became a client of ours, he used to work as a sergeant for the LAPD, worked there for a number of years, and as a sergeant, I guess when you're an employee of LAPD, not only are you protecting and serving law enforcement aspects, but in California where he's at, you see oftentimes on the TV that there's wildfires out there. And part of his job is to get involved in wildfires as well. So there's actually a famous fire that occurred a couple years ago called the Silmar Creek Fire. Actually a big fire that raged for a few weeks. It destroyed, I think, like 123 structures, 60 houses. So it was a pretty bad fire that they get out there on a regular basis. And he was actually tasked with fire protection during that time period. But the problem was they actually worked the fire for 19 plus hours over a course of several days. The problem was, and it was kind of pre-COVID, now everyone has masks, but at that time all he was given was a paper mask. So out there working a fire, inhaling dust, smoke, other things with just a paper mask and doing his job. He's protecting the city and the people of LA, and he did his job faithfully, but unfortunately his exposure to that fire and everything that came with it took a toll on his body. So lo and behold, he went to the ER a couple days after stopping work. He went to the ER, for upper respiratory issues. Was out of work for a few weeks, and lo and behold, he went back to work. He didn't want to make a claim for disability benefits. He actually convinced one of his doctors to say, you can return to work. And he returned to work in February of the next year and worked for a few months just until he realized it was just too much. It was more impact on his body that he wanted to believe actually occurred. He was having, basically he just couldn't breathe. He couldn't breathe at all. He was having lung issues, coughing all the time, coughing up phlegm and whatnot. But he tried to remain at work, but again, he had to stop work. And luckily, his LAPD, they provide disability insurance. They provide a lot of policies for their employees, but one's a disability insurance policy. It's with Reliance Standard, and he filed a claim for disability benefits, and he thought he'd get approved, but unfortunately, they denied the claim.
What was his actual diagnosis?
Ultimately got diagnosed with COPD. But beyond all that, and all of his lung issues, he also has back issues as well. But when he first made the claim, he just focused on the lung issue. So he filed a claim for disability benefits with Reliance Standard, and you'd think they would do the right thing, but unfortunately here they were kind of lazy with their denial. What they did here, they relied upon only an in-house nurse review. They didn't go out and hire a pulmonologist. They didn't go out and hire a quote-unquote independent physician to perform a review of these records. They hired a nurse, or actually it was an in-house nurse. They didn't even hire a nurse. It's one of their employee nurses. I'm sure she's a very qualified individual, probably a very talented nurse, but there was nothing in the record where I could see that she had any specialty or any specialization or any training in lung issues. Right. So that was the first problem I saw. But what they relied upon was this nurse review, and they also relied upon the fact that one of his doctors released him to return to work. Like I told you, he returned to work for that short time period for 2 months, and he kind of convinced his doctor to write a letter saying he can return to work, with some accommodations, but he could return to work, and they use that as justification. So what I'd like people to learn from this claim is that sometimes if you do return to work and you don't want to make this claim for disability benefits, it could ultimately backfire in your face, where the insurance company utilizes the fact that you return to work and utilize that you convince your doctor to sign off on it for you to return to work. It could be used against you at a later time, which was what they did here.
Right, so it's no good deed goes unpunished, and here you had a claimant who was like, look, I want to try to get back to work. A lot of our clients do, and here Reliance Standard punished him for making the attempt to go back to work. Right. So what were you able to do in the appeal, and what was your strategy?
Well, first and foremost, he has a lot of credibility. The fact that he tried to return to work shows he's a credible person. He didn't want to make this claim. But what we did with this, the first thing we did when he signed up with us is get a copy of the claim file. That's when I saw that everything they were relying upon was just this nurse review. So I got a copy of the claim file. I went through that nurse review and poked holes in that review pretty easily. I got updated medical records from all the treating providers. We got updated testing, updated pulmonary lung function tests. We got all that testing. And then I talked to my client further, and he was complaining about his back and neck issues. I said, well, there's stuff here. You don't have to just make this claim, about your lung issues.
Right.
Even though that's disabling in and of itself, let's throw the kitchen sink at them. So I had we ordered the MRIs. for his back. We ordered a functional capacity evaluation. We talked to his pulmonologist, who was like confused, like, how is this person disabled? We got him to fill out an attending physician statement, essentially stated he's permanently disabled. No ways is this guy returning to work. So we basically got all this evidence together that there was, and we filed this appeal with all this evidence poking the holes in their review, showing the shortcomings of what they did they were pretty lazy in denying this claim, and setting all the objective medical documentation that we got our hands on. We gave it to them saying, you guys got this one wrong, you need to overturn this claim in less than 30 days, which is really quick in disability insurance, denials and reapprovals. Less than 30 days, this claim was reapproved.
But it just goes to show, and we see a common theme, unfortunately, with Reliance Standard on seizing upon any, and I'll call it quasi-reasonable basis, because I don't even think it's a reasonable basis, to deny a claim. And here they just use the nurse who's on their payroll to look at the files. And in my opinion, if you're a nurse who clearly doesn't have the experience, education, or skills of a doctor who's a medical doctor here, a pulmonologist for starters, who's trained for at least 6 to 8 years more in that particular field, who says, look, this person can't go back to work, here are the limitations, here's the reasons why. Now you're a nurse who's challenging the decision of the doctor, which you're not qualified to do. Reliance Standard should then say to someone else at the company or the claims person who makes the ultimate decision, to say, wait a second, this person's treating with a pulmonologist who I would have wanted the claimant to treat with. I have a nurse who's differing. Common sense says, shouldn't I ask a pulmonologist or some kind of other doctor why there's a disagreement here?
They've gotten lazy over the years. Like, the first thing they should do is, like, they can have a nurse review it and say, what is your thoughts? Because if it's a slam dunk approval, then maybe a nurse review is enough. They can just approve the claim. Or if the nurse is like, I don't think there's enough here, then they should go to step 2. The nurse should just be the first round for the insurance company. But it seems either they're saving money or they're just being lazier as the years get on. I don't know.
Not only that, and not to put down a nurse, because we represent lots of nurses, and I think nurses are very qualified, but your Reliance Standard, who makes hundreds of millions of dollars or has well over $1 billion in assets, why don't you have a doctor that's your go-to person, even from a starters, who looks at it, reviews the records? I mean, trying to cut costs at every corner to use a nurse because they know they're going to get a nurse for a quarter of the cost as to what they're going to pay a doctor, and then jeopardizing the financial livelihood of all these other claimants because they don't want to spend an extra $50 grand a year to hire a doctor to review the records. It's another example of them being acting unfairly and not having qualified people to review the claim. So once you got the claim file and you put together your strategy, what was the final thing that you had to do in order to be successful?
We had to put together this appeal, which is basically, I had to put a roadmap together to make it easy for the insurance company to say, here's where you got all of this wrong, here's where you overlooked, or here's where you're highlighting things that should be highlighted and you're overlooking all this stuff that supports this guy's claim. Put that appeal together for them. It was a lengthy appeal because we had a lot of information, but it did the trick. Now the fight's not over because at the 2-year mark, there's a change in definition of disability even under this policy with LAPD. So at a certain point coming up pretty darn soon, we have to prove to them that he remains disabled not only from being a sergeant or a police officer with LAPD, but that he's disabled from any gainful occupation, which takes into account his training, education, and experience. But it's going to be a little bit more difficult to prove because we're going to have to prove that he can't do a sedentary job. And they're going to say, oh, he has lung issues, but he can sit there all day. Or he has, and we're going to say, well, yes, he has lung issues, but he also has back issues and other issues they have to take into account. So I know it's going to be a fight. I know they're going to love to say that he's not disabled from a sedentary job, but we're going to fight it, and we're going to keep on fighting and make sure our client remains on claim until he's able to return to work.
And I know you've been gearing up for that and getting strong medical documentation from him having frequent medical visits and things like that, and getting strong documentation and the support to anticipate that so we don't sit around and just wait for a cutoff. And hopefully the transition will go smoothly, but it's going to be probably one that's highly challenged in this particular situation, but at least you're putting the claimant in the best position to be ready for that.
For sure, and people should always know that even if you're on claim, you have to still treat with your providers. Even if your provider says, I don't want to see you for 6 months, sometimes you have to go, hey, doctor, I have to come a little bit earlier than that because I have to prove to my disability insurance company that I still remain disabled. So always keep on treating.
Well, congratulations on another Reliance Standard victory on behalf of a claimant. And if you're someone out there who has a short or long-term disability claim with Reliance Standard, feel free to reach out to Alex, myself, any of our disability lawyers. We'd love the opportunity to provide you with an immediate free phone consultation. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you. Hi, I'm Gregory Dell, the Managing Attorney of Dell Disability Lawyers, and I hope you find the video you just watched helpful. We put these videos out all of the time, and we'd love if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Beyond our videos on our YouTube channel, we also have lots of information available on our website at diattorney.com, and we encourage you to come to our website. The goal is that we want you to be educated about the disability insurance process, and when you get to our website, you'll see that we have information all about your specific disability insurance company, your occupation, and your medical condition. And we've designed our website such that you can easily search our website to find things that you may specifically be looking for. Now, at our website, we have thousands and thousands of pages of information, hundreds of videos that you can search, plus we're building a section of reviews of all the disability insurance companies, and we have the Ask Our Lawyer section where you can go ahead and ask us any questions that you may have. Now, we realize that you may not need us right now, but you may need us in the future to help you with your disability claim, and we think one of the best ways to keep in touch is by clicking the button below and subscribing to our channel. And most importantly, again, no matter where you live in the country, we're always available. Just go ahead and give us a call. We're happy to discuss your claim and let you know immediately if we can help you.